The ice smoothes over every victory. It forgets the cheers that shake the rafters. By morning, the sheet is clean again, as if nothing ever happened. But people don't reset like ice. They carry the weight of hands that lingered. The memory of heat in a room that was too small for what it held. One night can feel like release. One night can feel like truth. And one night can sit heavier in the chest than any metal ever could. Sometimes the hardest part isn't losing control. It's waking up and trying to put the walls back where they were. This is Clean Takeout, Chapter 5, Slide in Tight. Morning comes early at the rink. The parking lot is still half dark when Nate pulls in. The building smells the same every morning. Nate walks the lengths of it like he always does, heel to toe, eyes scanning the pebble. He drags his broom lightly across the surface. It tells him fast today. He nods to himself. By 8, the junior group arrives in bursts of laughter and heavy boots, cheeks red from the cold, parents trailing behind with coffee cups and tired smiles. Nate's voice shifts automatically into coach mode. For an hour, the rink fills with movement and noise and learning. Stones slide unevenly, brooms scrape too early. Someone slips and laughs. Nate corrects grips, fixes foot placement. He's good at this. Everyone knows it. One mom squeezes his arm lightly. He nods, polite. But when the kids file out and the ring quiets again, the silence settles heavier than before. Nate starts resetting stones along the boards, lining them up in perfect rows. That's when he feels it. He glances toward the far end of the building. Jonah is there, behind the glass near the sandwich station, half hidden by the support pillar, sitting on the bench with a paper-wrapped sandwich in his hands. For a second, Nate's chest tightens, unsure why his pulse suddenly feels louder in his ears. When he glances back again, Jonah turns and walks down, disappearing from the sight. Nate straightens slowly, staring at the empty space where Jonah had been. Warm air rolls out in thick waves, carrying the sharp bite of grease. A radio hums somewhere near the back, sports talk fading in and out beneath the clatter of tools, and the occasional hiss of compressed air. Cal stands beneath a massive mining loader, with a wrench in one hand. Evan crouches a few feet away. They work in rhythm for a few moments. Evan watches him for a second, then glances off toward the open bay door, where snow drifts lightly outside. Something sits on his chest. "Hey," he says casually. "I didn't know Nate was gay." Cal doesn't look surprised. "You didn't ask him." Evan lets out a soft breath of a laugh. "Guess that explains why he never dated any girl in town." Cal leans back against the machine. "It doesn't change who he is." "No," Evan agrees quickly. "Not what I meant." They go quiet again. Metal ticks as the engine cools. Evan tightens another bolt. Slower now. "You think Nate knows what he's doing?" Evan asks. Cal watches a thin line of oil drip into a pan below the loader. "I think he's scared." Evan exhales slowly. "Yeah." The radio fades into a commercial. Snow drifts heavier outside the open bay. Life keeps moving. Jonah doesn't wake up when he usually does. His body feels heavy, sore in the deep way it only gets after hard trainings and restless sleep. Memories tries to rise, and he shoves it down before it can take shape. He should have been at the rink hours ago. He throws on sweats and leaves. By the time he reaches the rink, it's close to 11, straight to the gym, but the hunger hits hard. He grabs a sandwich from a snack counter, biting into it immediately. Then he sees the ice. Nate is out there with the junior group, laughing quietly, correcting form. He watches, longer than he means to. That's when Nate shifts, turns his head slightly, eyes drifting in Jonah's direction. Jonah reacts instantly, looking away at the ceiling, at the hallway, at anything but Nate. Takes another bite of the sandwich like nothing matters. When he finally dares to glance back, Nate's already turned away. Relief and disappointment twist together in Jonah's chest. He wraps the sandwich back up slowly. This is how it has to be, for both of them. Jonah turns and walks out, without another look. Next day practice ends the same way it always does. Stones lined along the boards, sweat cooling on skin, breaths fogging faintly in the cold air. The team moves without much noise. Jonah throws clean. No attitude. No extra words. No smirk when Nate corrects a line. When Nate calls a tighter draw, Jonah nods once and resets. Evan and Cal finish packing first. See you tomorrow, Evan says, forcing lightness into his voice. Jonah nods without looking up. The door swings shut behind them, the sound echoing down the corridor until the rink feels hollow. Nate waits. Jonah slings his bag over his shoulder and starts toward the exit. Jonah, Nate calls. Why are you avoiding me? Jonah finally faces him. I'm not. You are, Nate says, since the last game. You're acting like nothing happened. Jonah exhales slowly through his nose. It was good. That's all. Nate studies his face. Don't bullshit me. Jonah shifts his jaw, eyes flicking briefly toward the door. Think of it as friends with benefits. The words fall flat between them. Nate lets out a short breath that's almost a laugh. Friends. Jonah meets his gaze this time. Well, we're not really friends exactly, so just benefits. Nate stepped closer. You can't deny what we felt that night. You wanted it, Jonah says flatly. Nate blinks. You followed every call. Jonah continues. On the ice you pushed back. In that room, a faint breath of a laugh. You crumbled. Nate's jaw tightens. Because I trusted you. And you trusted me. Jonah shakes his head slowly. No, that wasn't trust. That was just a gut fuck. He steps closer now, turning the pressure back on. You might be the skip out there, Jonah says, nodding toward the ice. But you aren't in the bed. The words land like granite. You listened. You moved when I told you to. You wanted it that way. It was just sex, Jonah says quietly. You liked how it felt. I liked how easy it was. So don't turn it into something bigger. Nate swallows hard. I saw you. Jonah's eyes flicker for half a second. Nate's breast sharpens. Look at me. They face each other across the matting, the distance thin but heavy. Say it, Nate says. Jonah's jaw tightens. Say what? Look me in the eyes and say it meant nothing. Cold presses in around them, but the words don't come. Jonah lifts his back higher on his shoulder and turns. Benefits, he says. That's all it was. If you want more, you know where my door is. Jonah walks away. Each step echoes through the rink. Fuck, you can't even say it facing me. Nate's voice breaks behind him. He shouts, Run like you always do. The door closes. Nate stands alone on the matting, staring at the stone Jonah left behind. Just sex. Just benefits. The words sit heavier than any loss ever has. Nate stands where Jonah left him long after the door stops echoing. His hand curls slowly into fist. Then he turns. The walk to the locker room feels longer than usual. Inside, it's almost empty. A few lockers hang open. The sharper scent of soap and sweat still lingers. Evan and Cal's spots are already cleared. Nate drops his bag onto the bench. For a moment, he just stares at the floor. Then his body moves on instinct. Shirt pulled over his head. Shoes kicked aside. He steps into the shower and twists the handle hard. Hot water slams down over his shoulders. Steam rising thick around him. His brace both hands against the tile. His breast shudders. Then the tears come. Silent at first. His shoulders shake as the sob finally breaks loose. Chest tightening so hard it hurts. He presses his forehead to the tile wall. Fragments rush back. Hands gripping him. Breaths in his ear. Just sex. Just benefits. A broken laugh slips out of him. He stayed there longer than he should, letting the water burn his skin like it might erase the feeling. But it doesn't. Nothing does. The parking lot glows under yellow streetlights, flakes drifting slow and thick through the air. Nate's breast fogs immediately. Then headlights blink on across the lot. Once, Jonah's car. Nate freezes. The engine hums low as it rolls closer, tires whispering against wet pavement, stopping beside him. The windows slide down. Jonah stares straight ahead, hands tight on the wheel. Get in. Nate hesitates, but he opens the door and climbs in. Jonah keeps his hand on the steering wheel. I want to say sorry back there, he says finally. I shouldn't have said it like that. The snow outside blurs into white streaks. I'm only here for one season, Jonah continues quietly. Provincials, maybe nationals. Then I'm gone. Back south. Nate swallows hard. I know. Silence thickens. Snow keeps falling. For a moment, it feels like they might say something else. Like one of them might reach across the space between. I get it. He opens the door. Cold floods back in. The door shuts. Jonah shifts into drive. Headlights sweep across the lot once, then disappearing into the falling white. Jonah is always first now. In the small gym beside the rink, sweat darkens. He runs until his lungs burn, lifts until his arms shake, pushes until the noise in his head finally dulls. By the time the team ice starts, Jonah walks in exactly on time. Nate's call shots without looking at him. Their voices stay clipped. Evan notices. Cal definitely does. Practice gets harder, longer. They drill until arms shake and lungs burn. Jonah stays late most nights, throwing alone. Nate resets stones without help. By the time Provincials approach, their timing is lethal. Cal watches it all quietly. It wasn't supposed to be his business, but he heard the voices that night. He was locking the rink office when the noise cut sharp through the hallway. Then Jonah stormed toward the exit. Nate stood frozen behind him. Cal moved without thinking. He crossed the floor and shoved Jonah back hard against the concrete wall. The impact echoed. You hurt my team, you're dead, Cal says low and steady. You don't play games here, not in my rink. Jonah shoved back. Get off me. You don't know shit. I saw his face when you walked out. Silence burned. Cal's voice dropped. Just don't hurt him. He's been through enough. I didn't ask him to fall for me. Then don't punish him for it, Cal said. Jonah walked out into the snow. Cal exhaled slowly. Even now, weeks later, his chest tightens remembering it. They're holding it together, but barely. The plane hums steady as it cuts through the cloud. The vibration settles into their bones. Cal takes the aisle. Nate sits beside him. Across the narrow aisle, Evan leans into the window. In the row ahead, Jonah sits alone. A flight attendant rolls a cart slowly down the aisle, the wheels whispering over the carpet. Nate shifts in his sleep, brow tightening, breast catching slightly like something heavy crossed his dream. Cal glances down at him. And just like that, the memory comes. Nate sat on the locker room bench, with a split lid and shaking hands. Blood's already drying at the corner of his mouth. His knuckles were red. His hoodie sleeves torn. Finn leaned in the doorway like he didn't belong to the moment, arms crossed. He just doesn't listen, Finn said lightly, like explaining a bad drill to a coach. Cal had stared at him. What happened? Finn shrugged. Same thing as always. He pushed me. Nate flinched. Later when Finn left, Nate whispered, voice barely holding. He says I make everything harder, that I question too much. Cal had seen it then. The bruises on his ribs, the way Nate apologized for bleeding. You listen too much, Cal said gently. To the wrong people. Nate had nodded like it made sense. And the cycle kept going. Pain disguised as care. Till one night Nate finally walked away. The plane dips slightly. Cal blinks back to the present. Nate's breathing evens again. Cal looks forward to Jonah's rigid shoulders. This season is already breaking something open. And Cal knows, deep down, it's nowhere near done yet. Suitcases roll across tile. The front desk clerk taps keys slowly, sliding room cards across the counter one by one. Cal stands with the folder in his hand. Evan leans against the pillar, stretching his shoulders. Jonah stands a step away from the group, phone in hand, not looking at anyone. Nate stays near Cal. The silence between them felt thicker than the winter air outside. All right, Cal says finally. I'll assign the rooms. No one reacts. Evan, Jonah, room 418. Evan lets out a quiet breath. Got it. Jonah nods once. Me and Nate 420. Nate doesn't look up. Jonah's jaw tightens just slightly before he turns away. No one says anything. The elevator is tight. Evan hums softly like he always does when things feel awkward. Jonah stares at the glowing numbers. Cal stands beside Nate. They step out into the quiet hallway. 418 is first. Evan swipes the card. The door clicks open. Jonah steps inside. Evan follows, rolling his bag behind him. The door closes softly. One door down. Cal swipes the card. The lock clicks. They enter together. Cal drops his bag by the chair. Nate sets his near the foot of the bed. Silence settles. From the wall between the rooms comes the faint sound of Evans laughing about something. Jonah answers. It lands in Nate's chest. Cal notices. You good? Nate nods. But he isn't. Nate sits on the edge of the bed, hands resting on his knees. Cal sits on his own bed and exhales. Get some sleep. Nate lights back, staring at the ceiling. The muffled voices next door fade. Light leaks through the hotel curtains like the day isn't fully awake yet. Cal is already up, tying his shoes. Nate sits on the edge of the bed, stretching his shoulders, jaw tight. Neither slept much. Down the hall, doors open and close softly. Evan knocks once on their door. Breakfast in 10. The breakfast hall smells like coffee and toast. They eat mostly in silence. Plastic trays, paper cups. A few quiet jokes from Evan that doesn't quite land. Jonah sits across from Nate. They don't look at each other. The rink is louder than home. More echoes, more people. Stones slide fast. Too fast. Jonah overthrows the first one. It rockets through the house. Cal's eyes narrow. Jonah throws again. Still heavy. Evan sweeps late. The stone clips the guard. Miss. First end goes bad. They give up too. Second end isn't better. Jonah's lines drift wide. Nate's calls tighter. They barely save one. Frustration is thick. Jonah's breathing is sharper. His hands clench around the handle between throws. Another stone runs hot. Fuck, Jonah mutters. Nate steps close, voice low. Eyes on me. Jonah looks up, but Nate continues. You got it. Same release, same weight. Jonah nods. The next throw curls clean, right to the button. The crowd murmurs, but it's too late. They lose by one. The second game comes fast. They start better. 2 clean ends. Then it slips again. By the eights, and they're chasing. Lost rock. Nate needs a perfect draw. The house is quiet. He releases. It overcurls. Misses by inches. Game over. 2 losses. Their backs are against the wall. They sit in the rink cafeteria during the break. Plastic chairs. Cold fries. Paper napkins. No one talks. Jonah stares at the table. Evan rubs his face tired. Cal watches Nate. Nate finally shifts closer to Jonah. It's okay. Jonah exhales sharply, but Nate leans in. Just eyes on me. The words are steady. I know you can do it. And you know you can. The cafeteria noise fades. Jonah holds his gaze. Breathing slows. Nods once. I can do it. Across the table, Cal sees it. Doesn't interrupt. Just nods quietly. Some nights change what touch means. Some week teaches the body how to hold distance. And some silence grow heavier than any fight ever could. They told themselves it was just sex. Just benefits. Just one night. But bodies remember more than words allow. They remember who steadied the breath. Who stayed when fears rose. Who mattered when control slipped. And now standing at the edge of elimination. They weren't just fighting for a season anymore. They were fighting what they tried to deny. This was Clean Takeout, Chapter 5, Slight and Tight. Don't forget to subscribe, like and share for more stories on gay audiobooks.